Most engines don't die from age. They die because someone followed bad advice. Manufacturers hand you a maintenance schedule built to keep the car running through the warranty period, not to help it reach 250,000 miles. Dealers charge for services you don't need and skip the ones you do. After 22 years working in shops, I've seen both sides of this. I've watched cars fall apart at 130,000 miles, and I've watched a Corolla roll in at 312,000 miles with original engine bearings that looked nearly new. The difference wasn't luck. It wasn't the brand. It was 13 habits the long-haul owner knew about and the short-haul owner didn't. The tip at number 1 on this list costs you nothing to do. No tools, no products, 5 seconds of your time, and it is quietly destroying fuel pumps in cars all over the country right now. Most mechanics won't bring it up because there's no money in it for them. Stay to the end. Number 13. Engine air filter. The engine air filter is the first line of defense against everything that tries to enter your combustion chamber. Road dust, pollen, construction grit, insects. When it clogs, the engine pulls harder against restricted airflow. Fuel trims shift. The computer compensates by pushing more fuel through for the same amount of power, which means richer combustion, lower efficiency, and more heat. Miles per gallon drop. Combustion efficiency falls. Over tens of thousands of miles, the added strain compounds into measurable wear on cylinders and rings. What they don't tell you is that the factory replacement interval, typically 15,000 to 30,000 miles, assumes ideal driving conditions. City traffic, construction zones, dusty roads, gravel driveways, any of those can choke a filter in half the time. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, a dirty air filter can reduce fuel economy by up to 10% in older carbureted engines. In modern fuel-injected vehicles, the economy impact is smaller, but the engine still works against restriction on every mile it runs clogged, and restriction means heat and wear. Pull the filter out. Hold it up to a light source. If you can't see light passing through it, the filter is done. A quality replacement runs between $18 and $34 depending on the car. Do it every 12,000 to 15,000 miles if you drive through dust, construction, or unpaved roads. Every 20,000 if your commute is clean highway. It takes 5 minutes and costs less than a restaurant lunch. Number 12. Tire rotation. Front tires and rear tires do not wear at the same rate. On a front-wheel drive car, which describes the majority of vehicles on the road, the fronts handle acceleration, steering, and the bulk of braking. They can wear up to 3 times faster than the rears. Skip rotation long enough, and the fronts wear down to the wear indicators, while the rears still have most of their tread life ahead of them. At that point, you're replacing 2 tires you shouldn't have had to buy yet, and the rears keep going, because nobody rotated them when they should have. 2 Toyota Camrys came in the same week, both sitting at 53,000 miles. The first had been rotated every 6,500 miles, even tread depth all the way around. Maybe 35% worn, plenty of life left. The second had never been rotated. The owner needed 2 front tires immediately. She was looking at 287 she hadn't planned for, and the rears still had half their life. Same car, same roads, 1 decision, 1 outcome. Rotate every 5,000 to 7,500 miles. Most shops will do it free with an oil change. If they're not offering it, ask. The parts cost is nothing. What it saves is a full set of tires lasting 60,000 miles instead of fronts burning out at 35,000. Number 11, transmission fluid. The transmission is the most expensive drivetrain component most drivers never think about, right up until it fails. Inside that housing is a network of clutch packs, solenoids, planetary gears, and hydraulic circuits operating under high pressure and continuous heat. All of it depends on clean, properly viscous transmission fluid. That fluid oxidizes over time. It absorbs heat through hundreds of thousands of shift cycles. It loses its ability to protect the clutch surfaces it was designed to cushion. When it degrades far enough, shifting gets harsh. The clutch packs begin to slip. Eventually, the transmission fails, and rebuilds don't come cheap. Here's what manufacturers don't advertise. Many of them list transmission fluid as a lifetime fill, meaning they say it never needs to be changed. That designation exists because the fluid outlasts the warranty period. After 100,000 miles in a vehicle that works for a living, lifetime is a sales phrase, not an engineering guarantee. Every transmission rebuilder I've known laughs at that phrase. They've seen what that fluid looks like at 130,000 miles. It doesn't look like something designed to last forever. A retired mail carrier from outside Memphis brought in a 2014 Ford F-150 at 118,000 miles, hard shifts on the 2 to 3 upshift. The fluid was dark brown and smelled faintly burnt. She'd never had it serviced. The flush and refill cost her $180. The full transmission rebuild that was likely 20,000 miles away would have cost $3,850. She drove that truck 3 more years after the service without a single shift complaint. Change transmission fluid every 30,000 to 45,000 miles regardless of what the manual says. If you bought the car used and can't verify the history, have the fluid inspected. Color and smell tell the story immediately. Number 10. Coolant flush. Coolant does two things most drivers know about. It keeps the engine from boiling in summer and freezing in winter. What most people don't realize is that it also carries a package of corrosion inhibitors that protect the metal and aluminum surfaces inside the cooling system. The water pump impeller, the radiator fins, the heater core, the cylinder head passages. Those inhibitors break down with time and heat. When they're depleted, the fluid becomes slightly acidic and starts attacking the surfaces it was built to protect. I've pulled water pumps from cars running degraded coolant at 80,000 miles. The impeller blades, the fins that push coolant through the system, look sandblasted, pitting, erosion, edges worn thin. I've pulled pumps from cars at the same mileage running fresh coolant serviced on schedule. The impeller looks like it came off the assembly line that morning. Not slightly better, completely different. The chemistry inside those hoses matters far more than most drivers know, and the evidence shows up the moment you open the system. A coolant flush runs between $79 and $126 at most shops. A water pump replacement starts at $412 on the low end and climbs depending on the car. A cylinder head warp from a single overheating event, caused by a failed pump in degraded fluid, can run $1,600 or more in machine shop work alone. Service the coolant every 30,000 miles or every 2 to 3 years, whichever comes first. Use the fluid type specified for your vehicle. Number 9. Brake fluid. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air passively, continuously, through the rubber hoses and seals in your brake system, whether the car is running or sitting in the garage. As it absorbs water, its boiling point drops. Fresh. 3 brake fluid boils at around 401 degrees Fahrenheit. The same fluid with just 3% water content can boil at 284 degrees. Under hard braking, emergency stops, steep downhill grades, brake fluid gets hot fast. When it crosses its boiling point, it vaporizes. Gas does not compress the way liquid does. The pedal goes soft or drops toward the floor at the exact moment you need it most. Think about the last time someone tested your brake fluid, not added to it, actually tested the moisture content or the boiling point. If you can't recall, or if the car has gone more than 2 years without that test, you don't know what you're working with. There is no warning light for this. Drop a comment below. When was the last time you had your brake fluid tested? Honest answers only. Most drivers have never had it done. A brake fluid flush runs between $97 and $143 at most shops. The moisture test itself takes 2 minutes and costs almost nothing. Most quality shops do it free during a brake inspection. 2 years is the right interval. The consequences of vapor lock in an emergency stop are not a number anyone wants to calculate. That's a passive failure, one that builds without symptoms. What's coming next gives you no warning either, and by the time the check engine light turns on, you're already looking at 2 repair bills instead of 1. Number 8. Spark plugs. Spark plugs ignite the air-fuel mixture inside each cylinder. When they wear, and they all wear, the spark becomes weak, inconsistent, or mistimed. The engine misfires. On a single misfire, a small amount of unburned fuel passes through the exhaust and enters the catalytic converter, where it burns off. One misfire does minimal damage. Repeated misfires over weeks or months, the kind that accumulate slowly from plugs running past their service life, overheat the converter's internal substrate until it melts and the converter fails. Here's what makes this expensive. Catalytic converter replacement on a modern vehicle runs between $960 and $1,640 at a dealership depending on the make. Iridium or platinum spark plugs run between $9 and $21 per plug. On a 4-cylinder, that's under $75 for the full set in parts. On a 6-cylinder, maybe $108. Modern engine management systems are designed to compensate for early misfires. The driver often feels nothing while the check engine light stays dark. By the time it illuminates, the converter is already compromised. A home health aide from outside Phoenix brought in a 2016 Honda Accord with a P0420 code, catalytic converter efficiency below threshold. The plugs were original at 94,000 miles, 2 of them misfiring just enough to degrade the converter over time. New plugs went in for $74 in parts. The converter replacement came to $190. She paid both bills in the same visit. If the plugs had been replaced at 60,000 miles, she would have paid one of them. Replace standard plugs every 30,000 miles. Replace iridium or platinum plugs every 60,000 to 100,000 miles. Do not extend past 100,000 regardless of what you've read elsewhere. The plugs wear before the engine shows it. The next tip has nothing to do with your engine or your brakes. It involves a filter most drivers have never laid eyes on. And when it clogs, it silently burns out a component that costs $340 to replace. Number 7. Cabin air filter. The cabin air filter cleans the air moving through your heating and air conditioning system before it enters the passenger compartment. Most drivers have never seen one and don't know it exists. When it clogs, and in a high-mileage car it clogs completely, the HVAC system fights restricted airflow on every cycle. The blower motor, which pushes air through the system, compensates by running harder and hotter than it was designed to. Over time, that continuous strain burns the motor out. I've replaced blower motors on cars where the cabin air filter hadn't been changed in 4 or 5 years. In some cases, the filter has collapsed inward from the suction pressure, packed so tight with debris it can no longer hold its shape. The motor shows it every time. Brushes worn, housing running hot to the touch. I've replaced blower motors in cars the same age with filters changed on schedule. The motor looks and performs like new. The blower is the same part. The filter is the only difference. A cabin air filter runs between $22 and $28 at any auto parts store and takes about 10 minutes to swap out. No tools required on most vehicles. The blower motor it protects runs $340 to replace at a shop, labor included on a straightforward access design. Change the filter every 15,000 to 25,000 miles or once a year if you park under trees or drive through heavy pollen seasons. Quick reminder, if these tips are saving you money, hit that subscribe button right now. New videos go up every week and it costs you nothing. 7 tips down and every one of them costs money to fix. The next one costs $38 and takes 15 minutes, but if you let it go, it will strand you on the highway with no warning and no second chances. Number 6. Serpentine belt. The serpentine belt is a single continuous loop of reinforced rubber that drives every major accessory on your engine: the alternator, the power steering pump, the air conditioning compressor, and on many vehicles, the water pump. One belt. Everything depends on it. When it snaps, all of those systems fail simultaneously. The alternator stops charging the battery. The power steering goes heavy. If the water pump is belt-driven, the engine begins overheating within minutes. The car coasts to a stop on whatever road you happen to be on. According to the Automotive Aftermarket Industry Association, serpentine belt failure is among the most common causes of unexpected roadside breakdowns across the country. The belt doesn't always give fair warning. Cracks and glazing develop on the underside, the surface you can't see without removing the belt or using a mirror. By the time it squeals loudly enough to notice from the driver's seat, it may already be days from failure. A quality replacement belt runs between $38 and $67 depending on the car. Labor adds another $47 to $85 at most shops. A breakdown from a snapped belt, tow truck, emergency diagnosis, and same-day repair at whatever shop has an open bay can run $847 or more when it all comes together. Replace the belt every 60,000 to 90,000 miles, or at the first sign of cracking, fraying, or glazing on the rib surface. Pull the hood and look. Most drivers assume electrical problems start with the battery. What's coming next proves that assumption wrong almost every time, and the fix costs less than a pizza. Number 5. Battery terminal maintenance. Battery terminal corrosion is one of the most overlooked causes of electrical problems in aging vehicles. The white or bluish-green buildup that forms on the terminals isn't cosmetic, it's resistance. It interrupts the clean flow of current between the battery and the charging system. When the alternator has to push current through corroded connections, it operates under elevated load to maintain voltage. Over time, that added strain shortens its life. The driver replaces the battery, the symptoms return, and eventually they're looking at an alternator too. 2 Honda Civics, both at 78,000 miles. One came in with a dead battery and heavily corroded terminals. We cleaned the terminals, battery tested fine. It had been failing to charge fully because the connection was compromised. The alternator was beginning to show elevated resistance under load. The second Civic came in for routine service. Terminals clean, connections solid, both battery and alternator reading correctly. Same car, same mileage. One owner had cleaned the terminals occasionally, one never had. A battery terminal cleaning brush costs between $6 and $9 at any auto parts store. A paste of baking soda and water neutralizes the corrosion in under 3 minutes. A new alternator runs 427 installed on a simple application. A replacement battery runs a 153. Both are preventable with a brush, a paste, and 10 minutes twice a year. Pop the hood and look at the terminals right now. If you see buildup, clean it today. 5 tips that all deal with parts and fluids. The next one is about a single habit, something that happens every time you go in for service, and changing it costs less than $20 more per visit while adding years to the engine. Number 4, synthetic oil. Most drivers treat oil changes like a commodity. Same service, same oil, lowest price. Here's what they don't understand. Conventional motor oil is refined from crude petroleum with a molecular structure that varies in size and stability. Under heat and stress, the smaller, less stable molecules break down first. Viscosity drops. The oil film separating metal surfaces gets thinner. At the far end of a 5,000-mile conventional oil interval, the engine is not running on fresh oil. It's running on degraded oil with diminishing protection. And the majority of internal engine wear happens in exactly that window. Full synthetic is engineered with uniform molecular chains that resist thermal breakdown, maintain viscosity longer under heat, and flow faster at cold start, which is when the majority of engine wear occurs regardless of oil type. The difference isn't theoretical. I've seen it on the lifts for 22 years. A building contractor from outside Nashville had been running conventional oil on a 2017 Chevy Silverado his entire working life. Changes every 4,500 miles, never missed one. He switched to full synthetic at 89,000 miles after I showed him what the valve train looked like through the filler opening. He came back at 162,000 miles for an unrelated repair. We pulled the valve cover while we were in there. The cam lobes and lifters looked close to new. He told me a conventional oil change had run him $47 at his usual shop. The synthetic cost $89. Over that mileage, the difference was roughly $630 in service costs. The difference in engine condition was not something you could put a number on. Switch to full synthetic if you haven't. Use the viscosity printed on your oil cap. Change it every 7,500 miles. Not the 10,000 some shops advertise, especially if you tow, drive in extreme temperatures, or run the engine hard. The next tip involves a fluid that almost nobody changes on schedule. And when it breaks down, it attacks the most expensive steering component on the car from the inside out. Number 3. Power steering fluid. Power steering fluid does more than transmit hydraulic pressure through the steering system. It lubricates the pump, the high-pressure lines, and the rack and pinion assembly, the component that physically converts your steering input into wheel movement. That fluid oxidizes and breaks down with age and heat. As it degrades, it loses its lubricating properties and begins holding contaminants in suspension. Those contaminants circulate through the system continuously, accelerating wear on the pump seals and the rack internals until one of them starts leaking or fails outright. Think about the last time anyone mentioned your power steering fluid during a service visit. Not topped it off after a leak, actually flushed and replaced it on schedule. If you've owned the car more than 3 years and can't remember a flush, the fluid in that system right now is likely dark, oxidized, and working against the components it's supposed to protect. Pull the reservoir cap and look. Fresh power steering fluid is typically amber or light pink. Fluid that's been circulating for 60,000 miles without a change is often dark brown with a faint burnt smell. A power steering flush runs $103 at most independent shops. A rack and pinion replacement on a mid-size sedan starts at $1,350 for parts and labor on a straightforward application and climbs from there on more complex designs. Flush the fluid every 50,000 miles or every 3 years. If the car has 6 figures on the odometer and you've never had it done, that's your answer. 2 tips left. The one at number 1, the habit that costs nothing, requires no tools, and takes 5 seconds, is the one I promised at the start that most mechanics will never bring up. That's next, right after number 2. Number 2, cold start discipline. The majority of engine wear in a vehicle's lifetime does not happen on the highway. It doesn't happen during hard acceleration or heavy towing. It happens in the first 30 to 60 seconds after a cold start, before oil pressure has fully built, and before the film of oil that separates your bearing surfaces from the metal they ride on has reached every part of the engine that needs it. In those first seconds, metal contacts, metal with almost nothing between them. What you do in that window matters more than almost any other single habit. Here's what they don't tell you. Modern engines don't need a 5-minute warm-up idle. That's old advice from carbureted engines that needed time to reach operating mixture. But they do need 30 to 60 seconds of light, easy driving before the throttle goes down. The oil has to circulate. The clearances have to normalize as metal expands to operating temperature. Drivers who start the car and immediately accelerate hard, especially on cold mornings, are putting maximum load on bearing surfaces that are still running dry at the edges. I've pulled apart engines from 2 identical 2013 Honda Accords, both at 140,000 miles. The first owner was a short commute city driver who started the car and pulled into traffic immediately, every single morning. The cam bearing surfaces showed measurable wear. scoring visible to the eye, clearances opening up beyond spec. The second came from a driver who let it move gently for the first block or two every morning without exception. The bearings looked like the car had 60,000 miles on it. Same engine, same mileage. One habit, every morning, for years. Start the car, let it sit for 20 to 30 seconds. Pull out gently. Keep the RPMs under 2,000 until the temperature gauge begins to move off the cold peg. That's it. It costs nothing and it protects the most expensive components inside the engine every single day you drive. That's number 2. Number 1 has nothing to do with fluids, filters, belts, or anything under the hood. It costs you absolutely nothing. Takes 5 seconds, and it is destroying fuel pumps in cars across the country because nobody talks about it. Number 1, fuel level. The fuel pump in your car sits at the bottom of the fuel tank, submerged in gasoline. That's intentional. The gasoline surrounding the pump cools it and lubricates the components inside it continuously while the engine runs. The pump runs hot. It runs every mile you drive. The fuel around it is what keeps that heat manageable and the internal components from wearing prematurely. Every time you let the tank drop below a quarter full, the fuel pump begins operating with less cooling and less lubrication than it was designed to have. The fuel around it gets shallow. The intake pulls air when the car corners or accelerates. The pump runs hotter. Do it occasionally and it doesn't matter. Do it habitually, running the tank to the last bar before every fill-up. And you are shortening the life of a component that costs $487 to replace installed on a straightforward application. A real estate agent from outside Denver brought in a 2015 Toyota RAV4 at 94,000 miles with a failed fuel pump, car dying at highway speed, stuttering on acceleration, rough idle. She'd run that tank to empty dozens of times over the years, thought it was more efficient to fill all the way up from empty. The pump was replaced for $487. She asked me what had caused it. When I explained the cooling function of the fuel, she went quiet for a moment. Then she said nobody had ever told her that. Not the dealership, not any shop she'd been to. That's because there's no service to sell around it. The fix is free. Keep the tank above a quarter, always. Set it as a personal rule the same way you'd set a rule about running red lights. The pump runs cooler, lasts longer, and the habit costs you nothing except filling up slightly more often. 13 tips. Not one of them requires a lift, a specialty tool, or a mechanic's license. Air filter, tire rotation, transmission fluid, coolant, brake fluid, spark plugs, cabin filter, serpentine belt, battery terminals, synthetic oil, power steering fluid, cold start discipline, and fuel level. Do all 13 and you are running your car the way the engineers who built it intended, and well past the mileage the people who sold it to you expected. The challenge is this. Open your glove box right now, find your maintenance records, and figure out which one of these you've been skipping. Then fix it this week. If you want to know which car maintenance mistakes are costing drivers the most money right now, click the video on the left. I'll see you there.